So, addiction arises when the unquenchable human desire for union with God misdirects and pathologically attaches to a person, a substance, or a behavior.
Lately, I've been nostalgic for 2007. Before smartphones, before universal Wi Fi, back then community was bigger than just a group chat and messier. I miss the mess of people talking over each other. These days, I find it harder and harder to be present. I can be sitting in one room while mentally traveling across headlines, inboxes, and group texts. I can be near people I love and still not be fully with them. Honestly, my relationship with technology feels a little bit like an addiction. I like the feeling that I can know everything, checking headlines from around the world before I've had my coffee. I like the feeling that I can be everywhere at once, texting my son in California and my daughter 6 hours away and my friends in Germany and Norway. When my phone buzzes with an email or a comment or a text, I feel needed, and I confuse that feeling with purpose. I imagine myself connecting to the wider world while actually missing the world that's right in front of me. Okay, maybe I'm not addicted to the technology itself so much as that feeling it gives me, this illusion of power and importance, of being indispensable. According to our guest today, we are all addicts. Addiction, he says, is what we humans do with our pain. From the H.E. Butt Foundation, this is the Echoes Podcast. I'm here with my co-host, Camille Hall-Ortega. Our guest today is Ian Morgan Cron. He is an Episcopal priest, a Wall Street Journal bestselling author, a psychotherapist, and an Enneagram teacher. We're excited to talk with him today about his new book, The Fix. Whether you struggle with an addiction or know someone who struggles, this is a conversation you don't want to miss. And we do want to note that this conversation is kind of PG-13, so just be aware of that. Ian, welcome.
Thank you. It's a delight to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yes, we're so excited to have you. We've got lots of questions for sure.
Yes. I want to start with the one from the intro. In your new book, you say that we are all addicts. I mean, are you serious? What does that mean?
I love that. Are you serious? Are you serious, Clark? Um,
Yeah, but really, I don't know. I On the one hand, I know what you mean, but on the other hand, we're not all addicts, are we?
yeah, so let's just define addiction because I think
Okay.
that may be where the rub is here, right? So addiction arises when the unquenchable human desire for union with God misdirects and pathologically attaches to a person, a substance, or a behavior, right? Now, I don't know anybody who can't cop to that, right? Like,
Yeah.
even the earliest church mothers and fathers in the desert, right? Like 3rd and 4th century, they spoke about addictions at great length. They only called them attachments. They were
Mm,
clinically, we came up with the word later, addiction, but they spoke about attachments. And you knew that you were in the grips of an attachment when you would use a person or a substance or a behavior in excess of your need for it for purposes other than that for which they were intended
mm,
and as an ends rather than a means to a legitimate end. And look, we have to kind of just be careful here
Yep.
because look, I'm not giving you the diagnostic and
Of
statistical
course.
manual definition
of
of
course.
an addict,
Of
right?
course. Yeah. Yeah.
And we're talking in more sort of human theological kind of categories, right? What people don't realize about Alcoholics Anonymous is that its secret or sort of its anonymous co-founder was the great Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung. And Carl Jung had this incredible correspondence with Bill W., the founder of AA. And in one of the most amazing letters, he basically describes all addicts and alcoholics as frustrated mystics.
Ooh.
Wow.
But there's different gradations of addiction, right? There's mild addiction, there's moderate addiction, there's severe addiction. There are some addictions that are relatively benign, right? There are others that are fatal if not treated quickly, right? So,
Right.
I mean, this is a big topic. I just think for our purposes, we could just say that the human condition is such that we have these disordered loves, to borrow an idea from St. Augustine, right? And when these loves are in play, it diminishes us and it diminishes our capacity to love God and to love ourselves and to love others. And therefore, we should all be regularly doing a little bit of an inventory of our
Mm.
spiritual life, looking for attachments and addictions that are again diminishing us.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Really
You
good.
said that an addict is a frustrated mystic, or that's one way
Mm,
to think of it, which I
yeah.
love. Um, in some ways, I think of your work on the Enneagram, which is how I first came to know you, not know you personally, but know your work, as a kind of a mystic project. Do you think of your work on the road back to you as mysticism?
I've never thought of it in in that category. I would probably say that my life's journey began as a Roman Catholic boy.
Mm.
I really came to faith in the Catholic Church
Hmm.
as a young boy, powerfully, really. And I had a very good church experience, a terrible educational experience with the Catholics. Well, that's not true. I did my graduate work in a Catholic seminary, so I had a great experience there, but as a little kid, not so great. And then came to, kind of a different kind of conversion in, my young life years and, as a kid. Um, Very positive. But my heart has always been rooted liturgically and sort of located in and drawn toward a contemplative theology. So I would say if by mystic you mean appreciating those dimensions of God that are not knowable,
Yes.
then the answer is yes.
So interesting. Ian, I am very curious because we're talking about um, your previous book about the Enneagram, The Road Back to You. And I'm very curious what road led you to writing about the fix? How did these two things
Yes.
come together? Because we have lots of questions about how to think about these two things together.
I'll tell you an interesting story about sideways way into this, right? Like
Yeah.
here I am, I'm an Episcopal priest. I am a therapist. I'm a speaker. I'm an author. I'm a trained spiritual director. I'm all these things. And I'm like, it's so frustrating because I find myself, kind of in this place of, I just admired everyone who had one thing on their business card. I was like, "What is
Mm.
wrong with you that you cannot figure out what you do vocationally?" I remember driving by all those ranches, and I remember having this sudden realization that my life's mission was to help people enter into a deeper conversation with the mystery of their own lives.
Yes.
That was my life's calling.
That's awesome.
So when you look at my books, that's kind of what they are, right? Like, I just tend to
Yeah.
gravitate toward topics that help me help others enter into a deeper conversation with the mystery of God and their own lives, right? Like, just
Really
trying to
good.
figure this out. So, books like the Enneagram, books about the 12 steps, memoirs, books about St. Francis, it's like then that was a big sandbox in which I can play around and go looking for juicy things that I'm like, oh, this changed me. I wonder if some other people would like to hear about it. And that's how books get born for me. It drives publishers crazy because they would love me to write only Enneagram books forever and ever, amen.
I'm sure. I'm sure. I'm
And
sure.
I'm like,
Yeah.
"Sorry."
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm always like, "Sorry, that's not what this Tigger does." It's just that I'm like, "Oh, wow. The 12 steps have had such a meaningful impact on my life. How can I present them to others who could derive equal benefit, though they themselves may not consider themselves addicts or alcoholics in the traditional sense of the word?"
Yeah. Yeah.
Can you talk about the impact 12 steps have had on your life?
Sure, yeah. So I first went into recovery for a drinking problem in 1987. That's a long time ago. I was a
Wow.
young guy. I would never say that I was you know, probably a an alcoholic in college. I mean, if I were to be quite frank. I went to 12-step groups for about 4 or 5 years, at that time, and then I just I sort of, for reasons I understand, kind of phased out and stopped working a program of what we would call active recovery, right?
Yeah.
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 Then a bunch of years go by, I get and I don't have any problem with alcohol or any mood altering substances multiple decades, right?
Wow.
I'm then prescribed some medication,
Mm.
and it's a long story, it's in the
Yeah.
book, that eventually became, a crisis for me. Initially, I wasn't thinking to myself when I started those medications, "Oh, guess what? This is a relapse," or "This is because it wasn't drinking.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Uh, but it was by the time I figured out, "Oh, crap, I got a problem," um, it was too late. Like, I was already too far down the wormhole. So I returned to the 12 steps as a way of life and then began to realize, "Oh my gosh, the theological just beauty of these steps and the depth of them is so great." And you don't have to be an alcoholic or an addict to derive the same benefit from them that addicts and alcoholics do get
Yeah.
from, you know what I mean? Like, it's like, this is just a design for living that anybody could do, and they would derive remarkable benefits for their lives.
So we're talking about this broad definition of addiction, this broad definition of attachment. I love conflating those two ideas or bringing them together. And yet, we're in a country where traditional addictions and substance abuse seems rampant. Alcoholism seems rampant right now, although I guess alcohol is on the decline because cannabis and some other drugs are becoming more available. Can you speak to the rate of substance abuse in our country right now?
Listen, we have a catastrophic addiction problem in this country. And it's not just with alcohol and drugs, though those are enormous. How about gambling?
Yeah.
Do you have any idea of how big the gambling problem is getting in our country? I get a call all the time from parents who I just recently got a call from a parent. I got 2 14-year-old kids who now have a gaming addiction. They had
Wow.
twin sons. They have, right, like, they're gaming all night, right? They're missing school.
Mm.
They can't g or tech gamble. I mean, there are there's kind of a, how do I wanna say this? The possibilities for addiction are legion, right? It's just
That's good.
it's legion. So, when the human heart's desire for God, again, misdirects and attaches itself compulsively to a person, a behavior, or a substance, then an addiction is off to the races, okay? And I run into pastors, good people of faith, struggling with addiction. And when I do, someone will, I'll get a call, someone says, "Can I talk?" And then I always know it's going to be about porn. And then I'm like, "Okay, sure, we can have coffee. You're the 350,000th person who's wanted to talk to me about this."
Yeah.
And they'll pour their hearts out, and I'll be like, "Mm-hmm, mm-hmm." And I'll be like, "Is that all you got?" And they'll be like, "Yeah, that's it." I'm like, welcome to doing dumb human stuff.
Mm.
You're just doing dumb human stuff." So part of what the goal of the book was to also to get it out of this kind of addictions thing. It's like, no, this is just dumb human stuff, and there's a way out of this dumb
Mm.
human stuff if
That's
you
good.
just these steps are a great way out. And listen, let's just be clear about something. Someone comes to me and they say, "I have a drinking problem," or "My past so and so has a drinking problem." I'm like, "No, they don't. They have a drinking solution.
Wow. Oh, that's good.
They don't
That's good.
You don't have a porn problem, you have a porn solution."
Mhm. Mhm.
Hmm.
And suddenly what awakens in people is a new kind of compassion and understanding.
Yeah.
Because in the mind of the addict, this isn't a problem, it's a solution. It's a solution to a problem. Very rarely do I meet guys that have porn problems. And Camille, to be honest, I don't work with women in that capacity, but if
Yeah.
I did, I'm assuming the same would be true. That honestly, I'm always like, this isn't about sex. This isn't just isn't. This is about something much deeper in the human soul that you're trying to address a kind of interior distress. Often it's just depression or anxiety or both, or loneliness or a sense of powerlessness or whatever it is. And your clever little mind just attached itself to a behavior that in the short term worked. In the short term, it worked. It made you feel better. The problem is it's always escalating. So it's going to keep demanding more and more of you until there's no freedom left in you. And now you're just a tyrannized kind of um, enslaved person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's what these things do.
Yeah. I am we talked about how you came to, from this idea of Enneagram to the fix 12 steps. And I'm also curious, as you're talking about these things, the problem and the solution, how you see those two things work together. Do you see people when they're doing their identity work in Enneagram work, do you see connections between Enneagram types and folks who are more prone to certain types of addiction? Or how do you see these two things come together?
Yeah, great question. Well, it's interesting, right? Like, first of all, sometimes I hear people say, "Oh, I have an addictive personality," and I'm like,
Mm,
"Nah, actually, clinically speaking, I just don't believe there's any such thing as that." I see every different type of the Enneagram types in the rooms of AA, NA, OA, whatever the thing is, right?
yeah.
Do some personalities have maybe a little bit more problem with impulse control? Maybe. I guess you could argue that 7s and
Hmm.
8s have a little bit, but I meet a lot of 1s, you'd be surprised, in the rooms of
Mm,
recovery, and part of it is just trying to quiet the mind of the inner critic, the voice of the inner critic, and so but I can't say I see any one type more than other types in the rooms of recovery. Although, it's interesting when I do a workshop on the Enneagram and the 12 steps of recovery, and, you could say that, okay, so Camille, what's your Enneagram type?
it's been a topic of discussion. I'm an 8, but
Okay. So I could argue that your passion of lust, which is this need to powerfully engage with others in the environment, right? Immediately engage with others in the environment is a kind of and your need to assert strength and control over others in the environment in order to mask your own vulnerability and weakness is itself a kind of addiction that is reflexive to you.
yeah.
Is that
Yeah.
true, or have you been successful
Can I
at
plead
just
the 5th? No,
Sure, you can.
feeling very vulnerable, Ian. Yeah,
Mm.
yeah, I think that could be true.
And I could go through all 9 types and talk about reflexive patterns of behavior that seem to have an addictive quality to them, because honestly, here's how we could find out, what you would experience if you just simply stopped that behavior.
Mm,
And if you began to exhibit
this is good.
patterns of withdrawal,
Mhm. This is
Hmm.
good.
then I would begin to go, "Huh, isn't that interesting?"
Yeah, yeah. Just thinking about it gave me a little anxiety.
I want to take a moment to affirm Camille. I think she is absolutely an 8, and she's been helping me understand her passion and curiosity in a way that because I'm a 7 wing 8, and so I was telling her just before this call that my desire to be an adventurer is kind of in partnership with this desire to be immediately engaged with my environment, and I actually am jealous of her ability to come in with the strength and clarity that she shows, and that jealousy sometimes creates in me something that I need to correct and remind myself that no, she's just being passionate. She's just being curious, and I need to let that happen because it's so important for her, and she's so good at it. And
Well, thanks, Marcus.
so thinking about the Enneagram and these personality types, or I don't know if that's the right phrase, it's really helpful for showing empathy and being grateful for a person's
Mm.
strengths.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree.
Can you tell us more about that, Ian? Because of course, we've seen, your books and also the resources that you have in your work with folks for their Enneagram types. Can you talk to us about how the Enneagram can be helpful in interpersonal relationships and not just self work, but also in how we interact with others?
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, I think most people come to the Enneagram very curious about other people, not themselves, right? I mean,
Mm.
just
That's
they're
good.
a little bit more like, okay, I got this crazy mom. I got to figure out my crazy
Oh,
mom. And then in the
Yes.
process, or they, sometimes they come in wanting to understand themselves. Because listen, the I always tell people like the greatest mystery you got to face every day is you.
yeah.
You don't understand yourself. And Paul talks about this in Romans, right? I don't understand why I do the things I don't want to do and don't do the things I want to do. I mean, it's like you're a big mystery to you. And if you're a big mystery to you, imagine what you are to everybody else. I mean, you're confounding.
That's
We
good.
are, right? And so I think what's so beautiful about the Enneagram is it is not perfect. It is not the gospel, right? It's an interesting tool that is sufficiently true.
Oh,
In other
interesting.
words, like it's not it doesn't give you an MRI of the personality doesn't show up on an MRI, right?
Yeah.
So we are talking about approximations of what's going on inside, right? So it gives you a low definition picture of what is happening inside 9 different kinds of people, right? Who
Yeah.
we see in the population enough that we should be curious about them, right?
Yeah.
And if you hold it that way, kind of hold it lightly, and realize that even if it gave you 10% more clarity about you and others in your life, that is actually 10% more clarity is a gigantic step forward in
Right.
terms of progress and insight. Like that's huge. I think it can do that. I don't think it's, you know, I'm always the one who's talking people off the Enneagram ledge. Everyone thinks I'm gonna be the one who's like, banging the drum, the Enneagram is everything. And I'm actually the guy who's always telling people, "It's interesting. It's
Yeah.
helpful. Um, let's not get too crazy with it. Just use it for what it is. Don't take it to the
Yeah.
like, out to some wild place of, you know" sometimes I hear people talking Richard Rohr and I had a conversation about this once, and
Wow.
Richard was like, he had gone to some big major conference, and he hadn't been at one in decades, and he said, "I came back and I realized that this is like their religion."
Yes.
And he said,
Yes.
"It's not a good religion." And I went, "You're absolutely right. It is not a good religion. It's an
Yeah.
interesting spiritual tool, but don't make it your religion because 'cause it'll be really disappointing eventually."
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
rigidity of uh, identifying with this very strict categorization that
Mhm.
you can see that it can be weaponized, that it can be,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, all of those things. I'm sure you've seen.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, 'cause, you ought to see the look on people's faces when I tell them that they aren't their personality. Like, they look at me like
Yeah.
I'm like, "Did you actually think you were your personality? Like, that's who you
Right.
are?" I'm
Right.
like,
Right.
"Actually, what the Enneagram reveals is that's not who you are. That in
Yeah.
fact" well, at least from a Christian interpretation of it, we would say that who you are is hidden in Christ.
Mm,
That there is this
Yeah.
essential self behind the personality that
yeah.
gets forgotten because you've been so over identified with who you are as these patterns of thinking, feeling, and behaving.
At Laity Lodge, we have lots and lots of speakers. Laity Lodge is the adult retreat center that is sponsored by the H.E. Butt Foundation. And in the 90s, Phyllis Tickle came out for what I believe was essentially an AA retreat. And this was I'm sorry, this wasn't in the 90s. This was in 2005.
Mm.
In fact, she came out the weekend I joined the foundation. How interesting is that?
Oh, wow.
Um, and
Wow.
and she's talking about the connection between the AA program, the 12-step program, and the institutional church. And so I'd like to just play a quick clip of her speaking in 2005 about 21st century Christianity in America and the origins of AA.
What Bill Wilson does when he comes along is he says, you know, those of us who are hurting, those of us who are now urbanized, those of us who have fallen under hard times with alcohol can help each other better than the church can help us. That's a significant thing. Those who are hurt are better healers of each other than are those who refuse to be hurt. And Protestant clergy, then as now to a large extent, was very reluctant to say, I'm hooked on heroin or any of those other things. Very reluctant, because they had to be somehow better than the rest of us. Bill comes along and he says, we can help each other. Second thing he says is, we can help each other in small groups, because if they get too big to be intimate, it isn't going to help. The small group movement begins there.
What do you think?
Well, the first thing I think is Phyllis was a friend of mine, and
Aw.
she was an early champion of my work. And so just hearing her voice got me a little teary-eyed, because it's been so long since I've heard her speak. Been so good to hear that voice. I mean, listen, she's on to something, right? Like,
Yeah.
all right, it's crazy. I go to 3 or 4 meetings a week. I went to a meeting just a couple hours ago in a church basement. I regularly see miracles of mind-blowing, just mind-blowing stuff, okay? There may be a guy in my meeting today. He's 20 years old. 2 years ago, when he came in, he was living in the back of his car. I mean,
Mhm.
he was so far gone. He's living in the back of his car. Now he's married. He owns a home. He has a job, and he's inherited a couple little kids from his wife's first marriage. And he's been part of a church that he sort of returned to a church tradition. And he's been sober for 2 years. Now, forever, people were saying, "This guy is hopeless. He's just gonna die. That's how this is gonna go." He was a heroin in and out addict and alcoholic. He has a powerful spiritual awakening as the result of working those steps. And now you would look at him and you say, if I showed you the before and after picture, you'd be like, How did that happen?"
Yeah.
Right now, that's happening in church basements where lots of these 12-step groups meet all across the country. And I always laugh, and I'm like, I say to their pastors sometimes, "Do you have any idea of what's going on in your basement? Do you have any idea of how Jesus and the Holy Spirit are showing up in your basement and radically altering people's lives in a way that makes the book of Acts look real?"
Yeah.
Like people's lives are being saved downstairs, and they're like, "I don't know, we just rent it." And I'm like, "You really need to figure out what's going on down there." Like,
Whoa.
because if you could bring what's going on down there upstairs, you'd have to buy a much bigger building.
Yeah.
Like if you could bring that level of human transformation upstairs, well, and I tell them it's possible, but you know,
That's so good. When I hear that clip and she first begins talking, and she's saying things that are really weighty, and she says something akin to, hurt people help heal
yes,
people better.
yes,
And that is something that many people would go, whoa, kind of raise their eyebrows out, because we hear a lot, hurt people, right? And so this idea of hurt people being better healers of hurt people, it's, to me, really getting at the idea of empathy, and how, even though it's a harder lesson when we have to learn it for ourselves, right? Before we can help other people really get at what's going on there. There's something to be said about fully understanding someone else's junk, because it's been yours too.
yeah, yeah. Well, look, this is just the spiritual calculus, right? Of the gospel. Someone asked me recently, why can't the church be more like AA?
Great
Hmm.
question.
Because that's what everyone wants to know. Like, why, if this is so great, why can't the church be more like AA? I was like, oh, it could be, but it would first have to admit that it's an alcoholic.
Yeah.
Oh,
It's first gonna have to admit that it's a mess, that it's screwed up,
Yeah. Yeah.
and really feel that at a very deep level. I'm not sure if it's ready to do that. This whole idea of like, yeah, of course it makes sense. We have a wounded Christ. But we should expect wounded people to help people. This should not be a big surprise, you know? There is some kind of thing that happens with the wounded, and we are wounded for each other. I do think that we we need to learn the power of um, leading out of the place of weakness versus power. Like
That's
there is a
good.
power in leading with weakness.
Yeah.
Um, and I've seen it in the rooms of recovery, and it works. It for sure works. She's right.
when the normal story you hear in 12 steps is similar to the one you described. A guy's down and out, he's living out of his truck. He's hit rock bottom, and there's something about hitting rock bottom that helps people be honest. What does it take for the church to hit rock bottom? What does it take for individuals who maybe haven't hit rock bottom to acknowledge that they are addicts, that they need the kind of help you're describing?
It's a very tricky question. I mean, first of all, not everybody has to hit a bottom like the one I described, right? You don't you don't have to listen. You can be a soccer mom who figures out, oh, I'm codependent and I need to go to meetings because my codependency with my mom or my children has gone off the walls and it's making my life unmanageable. You don't have to have like needles hanging out of your arms or sitting in jail. This is stereotypes people have about people with problems like this. It's ridiculous and unhelpful. I think you know, Bob Goff once said to me, he goes, Ian, everybody gets to pull their chute at whatever altitude they choose.
Oh, that's good.
I
That's good.
love
So,
that.
right. And that's the truth. You can choose to pull your chute at 10,000 feet or at 10 feet. Just recognize that the longer you wait, it's more likely that you're going to experience more damage.
It's really tough, and I love this idea that you spoke about, if the church could have, and it's on the main floor what it has in the basement. Can
Hmm.
you just, as we're nearing time, can you tell us if what hope looks like for something like that? How can we be hopeful
Oh,
about
yeah.
that future?
Yeah. Here's what I think the church is great at and why I think it's so important. The church has a story that does a remarkable job of clearly explaining why the world is the way it is. Okay, so we have a story. It's a very compelling story um, when told intelligently. It has practices that speak to the deep longings of the human heart. So, for example,
Yeah.
as I mentioned earlier, I'm a priest. So, I actually became a priest because of the Eucharist. I didn't become a priest because I wanted to preach or run churches. I became a priest because of this profound love for the liturgy and the Eucharist and wanting to be involved in that. And so for me, but like, okay, so when you think about the Eucharist, like this is where we're getting into the mystical stuff, okay? Like, all right, so you think about the Garden of Eden, right? What went wrong, right? This is what went wrong. Grabbing, grasping, taking,
Mm,
right?
Hmm.
That this Eve's posture of grabbing, right? Adam's this, right? And the solution to that problem is this.
yeah.
This is what happens at the Eucharist. At the Eucharist,
Yeah.
you put your hands out like this, and you can only receive it. You can't take communion, really. You
Yeah.
have to receive communion.
Yeah.
That is the antidote to this.
Yeah.
This is also a brilliant visual illustration of what an addiction is, right?
Taking, grabbing. Yeah.
Taking versus receiving. So I'm like all on board with church when it's healthy. I completely love it. I'm in 1,000%.
Yeah.
Now, there are a lot of contemporary distortions of church. I'm not a
Sure.
very big I'll be honest with you, I'm not a big lights, camera, smoke machine kind of guy. I honestly don't think you should carry Starbucks into church. You can do that when you go to
Mm,
Starbucks. People should have an experience of an alternative world when they go into a church. They shouldn't have the same kind of experience they get when they go
interesting.
into a restaurant with, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's like, oh my gosh, you're missing the point here. Like, church should feel strange to people. It shouldn't feel
Yes.
normal and comfortable. They should go in it going, what the hell are these people doing in here? This is really odd. Like,
Yes,
because we're
I love
talking about another kingdom, a kingdom not of this world. So you should go in
Yeah.
it and be a little disorientated, actually.
Mm,
Part of you should be like, but also drawn because something inside of you is
stirred.
is stirred and yeah, almost has a profound sense that as strange as this thing is, it
Mm.
sure smells true.
It's really good, but it kind of returns us back to where we started, like you said, this God-shaped hole, how we are finding our ways to understanding that if you're a person of faith, filling that with Jesus as opposed to things or people or whatever all the addictions we've talked about, that opportunity exists in a way that's so freeing. So
Mhm.
that's just beautiful work.
Mm.
Ian, as we're wrapping up here, because I know we're over time, where can folks connect with you?
Yeah, thank you. They can just go to my website, ianmorgancron.com.
Yeah.
All my socials are at Ian Morgan Cron. Lots of stuff for them to learn there about the
Yeah.
various and sundry things that I do. But super fun conversation. We went off in directions
Yes.
that, who knew?
Yes.
And that's always fun. So hopefully I didn't say anything, so provocative that people will be storming you with emails. But if they
We'll
do, feel free
forward.
to let me know.
Right. We'll
Yeah,
forward
yeah.
it to you.
We
No,
hope they
Ian,
do.
it's
We hope they do. And
yes.
just to show your new book, The Fix,
Yes.
I would actually really recommend this book for people. It's a great introduction to the 12 steps
Yeah.
if you don't know it. If you're
Yeah.
working the 12 steps, there's lots of books out there. And Ian, you're a very good writer. So I would encourage people who are working the steps also to get this book.
Thanks.
Thank you so much, Ian. We're so grateful. We appreciate you.
The Echoes podcast is written and produced by Camille Hall-Ortega, Rob Stinnett, and me, Marcus Goodyear. It's edited by Rob Stinnett and Kim Stone. Our executive producers are Patton Dodd and David Rogers. Our original music is by Johnny Rogers. Special thanks to our guest today, Ian Morgan Cron. Ian, do you subscribe to Echoes Magazine?
I absolutely do.
All right, I love that. And you can subscribe too by visiting us at echoesmagazine.org. You'll receive a beautiful print magazine each quarter, and it's free. You can find a link in our show notes. If you've enjoyed this episode, follow us wherever you listen to podcasts and be sure to leave a review because it matters. The Echoes Podcast and Echoes Magazine are both productions brought to you by the H.E. Butt Foundation. You can learn more about our vision and mission at hebfdn.org.